Hi, my name is Ian Kinder. Welcome to the Live Safe Academy show. Live Safe Academy is a safety and self-defense school. So we specialize in the training of first aid, assault and crime prevention, unarmed self-defense, chemical defense sprays, sharp weapons, impact weapons, tasers, and gun training. The topic of today's show is how to protect your family from civil unrest. And I've got two great guests today. Paul Janulis, who's a sergeant who served our country overseas 3 times, twice in Iraq, once in Afghanistan, and Lou Chiodo, who was a Marine officer and served his community for 23 years as a trooper for the California Highway Patrol right on the Mexican border. And he served on the front lines of the LA riots. If you guys like this show, you can help us, help you, and help others with a couple very simple steps. If you're watching this show on YouTube, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, share the show with others. If you're listening to this on our podcast, you can subscribe to our podcast, share the show with others, and then go to livesafeacademy.com/connect, where you'll have access to all of our podcasts, our videos, our articles. You'll have access to our in-person classes in the Detroit, Michigan area, and you'll have access to our live virtual programs that you can participate in from anywhere in the world. Live virtual programs featuring instructors like Lou Chiodo, like Paul, classes where you get to interact with the instructor just like you would if you're there in person. You get to ask some questions, you get to go through guided skill practice, so you're not just listening to them talk, but you're participating in physical activities where you're actually learning the skills. They're phenomenal programs. We've helped a lot of people with those programs, and we'd love to help you guys too. Now, guys, for this particular topic, and I think this is a very important topic because unfortunately, we've seen a lot of civil unrest recently, a lot of riots, and there's a very good chance that we're going to see even more riots in the future. And you both have very unique credentials when it comes to this topic. So what I'd like to start off by is you guys introducing yourself, give the audience a chance to get to know you, and then we'll kind of attack this topic in a systematic way so people can get as much benefit from this show as they can. So Lou, why don't we start with you, please, sir? Can you give us a little bit about your background and the service that you provided during the LA riots?
Oh, sure. Well, I started off in life as a martial artist, and what that did for me at an early age was teach me not only the mechanics of self-defense, but also help me develop my teaching credential, which I in turn put forth in my military service and also my police service as a state trooper. I think one of the things that's important about my background is that I spent my time working in the real world. Um, Theories are really fine, but there's nothing like going into the real world and having to apply theory. Um, this led me to be able to develop programs for the weapons training that I did within my agency, but then it also led me to the programs I developed for my own company. So I've over the last maybe 20 years as a private company been teaching combat shooting and related topics with it. We try to integrate all of that with self-defense because a lot of times confrontations will happen when you can't get to your firearm but have to defend yourself prior to getting it. So all of it kind of combines together. I spent a total of about 37 years teaching within the law enforcement community and spent approximately 10 years time in service as a Marine officer and attained the rank of captain there. So my entire life, basically from when I was 9 years old to present, has dealt with either training, being trained, or developing training for programs. So I bring that with the experience of also having served in the capacity as someone that went to the Los Angeles riot in 1992, which gave me perspective on how all of this stuff would fit into that environment. So my perspective of it comes from the street, not theory, and that's what we hope to talk about today.
Thank you very much, sir. And I know a lot of people have heard me say this many times, but you're one of the very few people that I call teacher. And I'm very grateful that you can be a part of this show because I think it's going to help a lot of people. And Paul, you're a sergeant in the Army And you and I have been friends for a very long time. You and I have been training partners for a very long time. You're one of the instructors on our staff, and you have your own show called Apex Mindset. And I know that this video is also going to be on your channel. For those of you who are listening to our podcast or watching our channel, I really encourage you to go over there and take a look at what Paul is doing. And Paul, can you introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background and a little bit about what you're being prepared to be called upon in regard to the riots right now?
All right, sounds good. I'll work backwards from my channel just because Apex Mindset is for mental fitness, um, dealing with making yourself more mentally sharp, more mentally prepared for, things in life. That could be self-defense scenarios, of course, but it could be just starting a business or getting rid of trauma, PTSD, things like that. And also dealing with relationships. A big part of what I do is relationships. So my military experience brought me to opening up that company and opening up that channel to help men, and I help women out too. About 20% of my clients are women, but the original purpose was to help men to be better men and to get rid of things holding them back, trauma, anxiety, things of that nature from combat experiences. And then also dealing again with the relationship component, which often falls apart for soldiers and law enforcement who, are dealing with the evils of the world, then have to go home and manage a relationship, And so that grew into what I do on my channel. And so that's how all this ties in. And being prepared and being able to defend yourself is a really important component for being masculine, being a man, and for bringing value to your family and to others around you. So that's why I include these topics. It's also a passion of mine. I just like Lou, I started off in martial arts, ended up joining the military and spent 40 months roughly overseas, both Iraq, Afghanistan, in conventional infantry units, as well as special operations units, and have quite a bit of experience there dealing with combat scenarios. As far as civil unrest is concerned, well, when you're dealing with war zones and populaces in a war zone, there's often a lot of civil unrest that goes into that. So it's very different than, like, the streets of Baghdad are very different than what you could experience here in the United States. But you're dealing with a lot of things with coin operations or counterinsurgency operations. I'm not always hunting and getting the bad guy. I might be doing key leader engagements or, things where I'm dealing with a populace, in which case dealing with crowd control, some crowds that are more hostile than other crowds and things of that nature all comes into play. And then, I did my stint with active duty. Now I do things with the National Guard. Well, with the recent climate in the United States, we're dealing with a lot of rioting, right? And so I've been preparing and dealing with civil unrest out in the Illinois area, Chicago area. So that's been a part of a kind of a new part of what I've been doing. So we've been learning about how to handle riots and crowd control and riot control and how to assist police. And we're really doing more of a policing measure now as a National Guard versus combat, which is what I did overseas. So it's a little bit of a shift in mindset and tactics, but it's caused me to kind of breach these topics and bring these experiences, to you guys here. We can all have a good conversation about it.
Great. Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. And I think a really systematic way and effective way to approach this topic is kind of our philosophy in our school is prevention, preparation, and response. And of course, if you guys have any additional things that you guys want to add to that, you guys are more than welcome to. But Lou, why don't we start with you? What can you give people as a recommendation in regard to avoiding these situations altogether? Because as I'm sure many people now have seen these videos, once you get caught in that violent crowd, you're at a huge disadvantage. And the best way to be safe is to prevent emergencies before they happen by paying attention to our surroundings, making smart choices that keep us out of danger before danger happens. So if you want to lead with that, and then Lou, once you've had your chance, Paul, you can jump in and then we'll move on to the next section.
Oh, sure. Well, one of the things that I would first suggest, and it's in line with what you just spoke about, is you have to be cognizant of what is actually happening in your community. So what that means is that you have to pay attention to what's happening in your news channels locally. You have to pay attention to any of these gatherings that are being broadcasted to say, for example, at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, at 15 Main Street, we're going to have, Antifa or one of the other groups that have been related to the violence involved in this are going to have some kind of a rally there. Well, common sense would tell you at that point, that's probably not a place you want to be around near 15 Main Street. But you'll only know that if you're paying attention to what's happening within your community, especially if you're living in a place where this type of violence is starting to happen. There's places in the country where this really isn't going on. And I attribute that to the type of people that are living there. I would probably not think the outcome would be too beneficial for Antifa or some of these other groups to show up there, because the people there will take care of things by themselves if law enforcement or whatever guard units are sent in there don't handle it. So those groups tend to stay away from those places because they know it's going to happen. But if you're within an inner city, or if you have to travel into that city, it's probably a good idea to keep up with what's happening around you. And that would lead you to make sound decisions about what you might want to do during that particular day. So for example, if you're planning to go out, it's a day off or something like that where you want to go someplace, well, having knowledge of what's potentially going to happen might cause you to change your plans. And you have to make sure you're flexible in doing this, because a lot of people, I think, we've discussed this in other places, they maybe have a little bit too much confidence in their ability. And we may see this also with people that are carrying concealed or, have training, in self-defense and in related topics. The environment that they're going to end up in at some of these events is unlike where they've been. And by being in a place where they haven't been, there's a lot of considerations that they may not really have, kind of prepared for, that all of a sudden they're going to be confronted with. And a lot of what they may think they might do or what they've planned on doing might go right out the window. So the best preparation would be not get yourself in there. If you are at work and you're within one of these inner city areas, and all of a sudden, prior to leaving work, you're hearing they have some kind of a thing going on at some location where you may have to drive through or go through that area. Well, you might want to shelter in place where you are until it settles down. It will definitely be getting caught in the middle of one of these things where all of a sudden you're getting dragged out of your car and you have no way of defending yourself. I could probably add in here something we discussed even as close as yesterday, that a lot of people might think that when unrest is going to happen, that they're going to get in their vehicles and they're going to head for the hills. You see a lot of this chatter, or you see a lot of this in the prepper community, to where, they want to get in their vehicles and go to these places out in the woods, so to speak, where they're not going to be affected by this. Well, the problem with that is you have to get there first. And, I can relate back to what I saw in the Los Angeles riot. We're traveling around with 10 heavily armed troopers in three vehicles, and we're getting shot at going through the street. Well, where does that leave the average citizen trying to get from point A to point B? If they think they're just going to drive through all of this stuff, that just might not happen. There's plenty of ways for your vehicle to get disabled. There's ways of your vehicle getting blocked into where you can't crash through barricades or whatever has been brought into the street. Even if you're armed, if the opposition is armed, when it becomes a two-way range, things go a little bit differently than when you go to the range and when you're just shooting at a piece of paper and cardboard. So these are considerations that, for a lot of people that think they've already planned this out, they may have not considered all of these factors. When we were in the middle of the riot in LA, I'm telling you, 10 people that were in the middle of that were worried about being able to get out of it. And these are 10 people that know what they're doing and 10 people that are heavily armed. We're in uniform and you're operating. And things get hairy to the point where you're getting ambushed just driving around the corner. Most people aren't going to be able to deal with that. We had countermeasures for that and we initiated them. But, you know, some guy in his car taking his family out into the woods, probably not going to happen. And then once you're there, you can't not be somewhere else. So whatever happens, you're going to have to deal with it, and it may not go the way you want. So I'll leave it there for additional from Paul and you, and then if there's any clarification, we'll come back in.
I think that's a great point you make about, you know, heading for the hills rather than shelter in place. I think you're much better off sheltering in place where you have as much control over your environment as you can. You know, if you're going to go somewhere else, it's probably going to be to somebody else's house because you're in the danger zone and they're not. But just randomly going out to the hills and not knowing the environment that you're going into is signing yourself up for an unknown circumstance that's probably going to be much more dangerous than the known factors that you can deal with. Paul, what is your input on prevention?
Yeah. So, well, the theme that, you know, everybody's hearing here is what we call situational awareness. And that's probably the key to getting out of most problems. You know, if you are situationally aware and you have the intel of what's going on around you, then you can avoid potential problems or prepare for potential problems. And that solves most problems you'll run into. So you're not running, everyone focuses in a lot of the training and stuff, and that's okay, you know, rightfully so, on what happens when, you know, it hits the fan, so to speak, or when you're in the midst of a scenario. And they're not, a lot of people aren't thinking about just the preparation piece, which is really the situation awareness piece. And so that's just something that, you know, everybody needs to be cognizant of and needs to put most of their energy and time into, is the being situationally aware. And so what does that mean? You know, I mean, that could mean something as simple as, you know, if you're going to shelter in place is a best option, which I agree, then being prepared to do that for at least a week. You know, what do you have food wise at your house? What do you have? Do you have extra, you know, batteries, like for things, chargers for your cell phone? If power goes out, do you have a solution for that? You know, do you have a solution to shelter in place in your home and be able to do that without having to leave to go get supplies or run into a problem? You know, are you, oh, I don't know why my camera just stopped doing. Oh, there it goes again. That's weird, huh? Anyway, yeah, so I mean, that's just a component that people need to prepare for, you know, having the things at the house that they need, having things in the car that they need in case they're at work or in case they're, you know, someplace in their workplace and they can't just drive out of the parking lot and go home. You know, having these things prepared, having a GPS system and a backup, even a map that doesn't require anything, any electricity, you know, or a signal. You know, these are some things that you can be cognizant of. But just getting to know your neighbors and getting to know the people around you and having that sense of community, that's a big part of that too. You know, I know my neighbors to my left and my right here. And it's just those little things can be really important, especially I think if you're in a city environment where you're going to have to shelter, or, you know, you're going to have to be in a place where if you go outside, you're dealing with a riot, knowing who is around you in your immediate and maybe having a plan with your social circles too can be very helpful. You got to keep in mind that these people that we're dealing with, the types of riots we're dealing with right now in the United States, particularly, they're not these insurgencies, or it's not Afghanistan where you have fighting season and it's the Taliban who's willing to hold up for months. You know, these are people who are going out to create a problem. They're going out to destroy property, to cause problems, steal stuff, whatever, but there's a limited amount of energy they have. They're going to run out of energy and supply pretty quick. You're not going to be held up in your house for 3 months. You know what I mean? We're talking maybe a couple of days. So if you're prepared for a week, even I prepare for a month personally, but if you're prepared just to hole up for a week, and you have enough stuff for that, I think that you're in pretty good shape as far as being prepared. You know, I think that about covers anything I want to add to it.
Yeah, I definitely agree that even just being prepared for a week, as far as having the power that you need, the food that you need, being able to weather the environment. So here in Michigan, if it's cold, that you can keep yourself warm. Everybody would be better off, regardless of civil unrest, if they can just do those basic things. So when we talk about preparation, you know, we're all martial artists, and I love my martial arts brothers and sisters. But one of the things that always kind of strikes me as odd is that people will invest so much time into their physical training, but they won't take basic steps to prepare themselves for real world violence, like owning a gun and being trained with a gun. Now, whether or not you own a gun, that's a deeply personal choice, and I respect everybody's right to make that decision for themselves. But the reason why I bring this issue up is when we talk about the issue of preparation, we have to be realistic about what that preparation is. And the reality is there are some circumstances that we can end up in where the only way that we're going to live is if we're armed and if we're capable of using the weapon that we have. So let's kind of talk about this from a matter of perspective of preparation. What are some of the critical steps that people can take before something like this happens? So if they get caught up in a situation like this, they'll have the best possible chance of success. And I know, Lou, especially in the LA riots, you know, there are a lot of people that had to fight back, whether it was their stores or their homes. And the only reason why they're successful at fighting back is because they were able to fight back. And one of the things I talk a lot about in my courses is a lot of times the outcome is determined by the steps you take before the situation ever happens. So what are some steps that we can take? And Paul, we'll throw you in there first since Lou went last time. What are some steps that people can take in advance that if they end up in a bad situation, they'll have the best possible chance of being successful?
Well, I mean, we can start with owning a firearm and having firearms training. I mean, that's pretty basic. And a lot of people, I'm surprised. I mean, here in the United States, a lot of people own firearms, but I'm surprised about the amount of people who don't or don't consider this, or they have a firearm, but they're not trained with it, or they have something, but it's put away someplace, or they don't have enough ammo really to even make it useful, or it's not in a spot where they could access it, or they're not in a situation where they're carrying it. Now, I get some of the laws in certain states and areas, maybe they can't, but most places in the United States, you can carry a firearm, or you can have one, right? And so I don't know why people wouldn't do that, quite frankly, especially people who take an interest in training, martial arts training, things of that nature. That to me is a very basic thing. And then, of course, knowing in a good course, it will tell you the situations when that firearm is appropriate to use and when it isn't. Obviously, it's not going to be appropriate. This is the problem you run into in the riot situations and the crowd situations. It's not going to be appropriate for you just to blast, your firearm into a crowd of people necessarily, if you're not being directly threatened or attacked, right? So you can't just do that. But if you're being attacked and lethal force is justifiable, I mean, if you start shooting, problems starts getting themselves solved really fast. The people who are out there rioting, they're not combatants in the same way that, let's say, an opposing army would be or an insurgency would be. They're arguably domestic terrorists, but they're not wanting to sit there and square off with somebody who is shooting at them with a firearm. They're wanting to, it's you got to understand, crowd and mob psychology is completely chaotic. So it's total chaos with what they're doing. If they're deciding just to pull you out of a car, that's just a chaotic decision that groupthink is deciding at that moment. You start firing your weapon because lethal force is justified, they're going to stop trying to pull you out of that car. You know what I mean? They're going to start moving on to something else that's more interesting. Anybody who's been in a shooting situation, whether it's civilian or military side's a little different, but particularly in a civilian side, once the sound of gunfire happens, people scatter very quickly, you know? And so I'm not saying, of course, that you would use a firearm where lethal force isn't a justifiable thing, because that'll obviously put you in jail. But if you're in a scenario where it is, and in a riot situation where people are getting pulled out of their cars and beaten to death, you know, that's definitely a situation where you might be able to use that. You're going to solve problems very quickly. And so I think I'll just kind of start there. I do want to see if Lou could address too, because there's the idea of less lethal tools, you know, that could be used in riot scenarios, and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for a civilian, because obviously it's very different if I'm in riot gear and I got a shield and other tools, right? And I have a crowd of National Guardsmen and law enforcement behind me. It's a lot different if I'm by myself with my family as to what I'm going to want to use for less lethal options. But I think if we want to just make that point, that's maybe in some circles and some places politically incorrect to make. I don't know why that is, but having a firearm, knowing how to use it, and being willing to use it where it's appropriate is a major component to defending yourself in pretty much all scenarios, whether it's assault prevention, whether it's home invasion, or whether it's dealing with civil unrest and riots. Having that tool and knowing when and how to use it, I mean, it's just irreplaceable. And people need to consider that and need to make that a priority. But I think that's good for me. I'll turn it over to Lou to expand here.
Yeah, Paul, and I just want to say a couple of things here real quick, and I'll hand it off to Lou. But I agree, and I know Lou agrees 100% with what you just said. And I haven't dealt with any type of mob type scenarios, but I know working scenes in Wayne County, we would oftentimes get very large crowds of angry people. And if they sensed any weakness, they would do everything they could to start to advance on that scene and cause problems. And, you know, police are quickly, you know, they're radioing in that we got to secure that perimeter. And there are always certain officers that you could put on that perimeter that would immediately shut it all down, because they just look like guys that you don't want to mess with. The point being that there's a show of strength there, because we are dealing with people that are basically, they're criminals. They're not fighters. They're looking for victims. They're not looking for a fight. The very important difference in psychology. I can tell you, being young and dumb and getting in fights where I was outnumbered, once people start getting hurt, they don't want to fight. It doesn't matter if you're outnumbered or not, because they're not signing up to get hurt. They're signing up to hurt someone else. So when they're in danger, their attitude completely changes. And so having that ability to fight back really makes a big difference, because the last comment I want to make here is that I think people, when they're confronted by a threat, they kind of put this ominous, this sense of like, they give too much credit to the person who's attacking them. That person is flesh and blood like everybody else. They break, bleed, and die like everybody else does. They're putting themselves in harm's way, just like you're in harm's way. And there's nothing in writing that says they're supposed to win and you're supposed to lose. If they're rolling the dice on you, you know, they're in danger too. And if you fight back, they're in just as much danger as you are when they attack you. So there's no reason for you not to stand up for yourself and fight back. And a lot of times just the act of aggression is what solves a lot of problems. And I do just want to make one last comment, Lou, as I hand this off to you, because I want to put this on the flip end, because Paul kind of brought this up about less than lethal options. You know, the flip end of this is we're all gun guys, right? And we all have a lot of friends who are gun guys. And yet there's a lot of gun folks out there, men and women, who don't also want to learn other means of self-defense, right? Because, I don't need that. I have a gun. Well, you can't use your gun in every situation. You're not going to have your gun in every situation. You can't even get your gun quickly enough in every situation. you have to have a comprehensive approach to safety. And I think, martial artists a lot of times fail to look at the essential aspects of owning a gun where safety is concerned, but gun owners a lot of times fail to look at all those other essential aspects of safety, like unarmed self-defense methods or other tools of force like pepper spray and things like that. So Lou, when we talk about preparation, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Well, first, I want to say great points that Paul made, and obviously what you just put out. Those are all things that everybody should be considering because they're about as valid as it can be. What I want to start out with, which I think is important for people to really start to understand about the preparation. It goes back to the concept that when I was a field training officer within the department, we would get new troopers that come out of the academy, and our responsibility was to basically put them through a break-in period, as we call it, to where, one, we see if they're suitable to retain, but also to train them to bridge that gap between being in an academic environment and coming out to a field environment. And one of the two things that I always try to emphasize with them is that, one, they have to understand the shooting policy like it was something that they were born with in their head. In other words, you have to understand completely when it's valid or when it's invalid for you to use whatever weapon system that you happen to be carrying. And part of the reason for that is not obviously because of the legalities of it, that if you improperly use it and you shoot the wrong people or at the wrong time you go to jail. But one of the things that it will help you with is decreasing your response time to actually using it when you have to. Because the one thing that'll get people killed really quick is hesitation, because they're not sure if it's something valid that they're doing. So you have to really, in the military, and I'm sure Paul used the same term, we used to call that rules of engagement. They're telling you when you can kill people, when you can shoot people, when you can blow them up, whatever those specific things that are relating to your operation. They're giving you guidance up front about what you can do and what you can't do based on the political situations where you are, based on the type of enemy that you're fighting, whatever the case may be. And in essence, it's pretty much the same way in what we're talking about. If you do have a weapon system, when is it going to be legitimate for you to use it? And these are legal questions. And these are things that we would encourage to find out in whatever area you're in this country. Things vary from place to place. Just owning a gun in certain places, you got to go through real hoops to do it. Whereas, you can go to a state like that borders mine up in Oregon or up there in Washington State, and you can walk in and get a concealed weapon permit by just walking in the place by signing up for it, and they make a quick background check and they issue your license. So, the variety, for people in different parts of the country that might be viewing this, find out what local laws are that pertain to this type of thing. You could probably try to contact one of the local district attorney's offices. Sometimes the police might be able to give you some information, but know the law and know what you're capable of using in various scenarios. So policies and procedures are very important also, meaning, what would be an acceptable behavior. That's the second thing that I used to tell them to get very familiar with, is not only rules of engagement for lethal force, but policies and procedures that covers the whole spectrum of your job. In other words, what you can do in certain situations or scenarios that's considered to be acceptable. When can you use a baton? When can you use a pepper spray? When can you grab onto someone? All of these things you want to be really familiar with, so when you're confronted with it, there's no hesitation on your part to know that this is something we can do. So that I would encourage people to do, because it keeps you out of legal trouble, and it also allows you to decrease your mental response time to things as it's happening real time in front of you. Now, the other thing we would talk about probably in preparation is we've discussed about probably shelter in place is a really important concept, because you don't want to get caught out in places where you may not, even if you have the ability to defend yourself with your, concealed handgun or whatever you have with you, it could in certain scenarios be completely overwhelmed, even though you have it. As an example, you pull your gun and you're confronting a person with it. Well, what if there's 5 or 6 more people in the area around it are also around? What are they going to do? Are they going to be standing still waiting for you to shoot them, or are they going to engage you? So from a scenario where you might think you're dealing one-on-one with someone, all of a sudden you got multiple threats there that can engage you all at the same time. So even if you have that firearm with you, you may be overwhelmed. I mean, from a military standpoint, we see it happen all the time. You run into a unit that's bigger, stronger, more powerful, and has more capability. Well, the best of units can get their clock cleaned in a matter of seconds in those scenarios. We see it in the field of police work. You have a very capable officer, big, strong, heavily armed, and all of a sudden you got 3 people that are weaker, smaller, unarmed, take them down to the ground and then kill them on the ground. So the point that I'm making here is that even when you have your weapon system with you, I think I alluded to it in my first thing, is that you can get overwhelmed by a scenario very quickly, and you can overestimate your ability to handle it. And that gets people hurt or killed. I've seen it. It happens in the military. It happens in police work. So for the average civilian who maybe is not even used to dealing with violence in the first place, this can be overwhelming. I mean, you got people that have not been in a fist fight that are going to find themselves in the most horrendous scenario that they'll ever face in their life without having any prior experience in dealing with it. This can be a real issue, because in the military and in police work, you're constantly training to deal with this stuff. And even then, when you have very well-trained people, things still can go wrong in a hurry. That's what we call casualties. That's what we call killed in action. There's reason why this stuff happens. It's just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So we want to emphasize that before I get into this next point, which is even when we shelter in place, which I believe to be probably your best option because you're in a familiar place. If you're in a suburb area, if those type of violent people start coming into those suburb areas, my feeling is they're going to probably find even more resistance from the people living there than they do from the police. Because remember, in a lot of these places, the police's hands are tied. I'm going to be real frank here, and don't want to be too offensive to too many people, but truth and reality has to be spoken. You got people that have been in elective offices that won't even allow their officers to go out in the field and do their job. You have people, officers, that are in their home, which is their station, being told to abandon it to these mobs that are out front. Now, where does that leave the rest of everybody in society when you have your political people telling those that's supposed to be defending them to basically lay down and do nothing? And we're seeing this in cities all over the country. Because I can guarantee you this, because I've done it, that if the police are allowed to do what they have to do, these people won't stand a chance of doing the violence that they want to do. We can end that stuff quick. We ended the LA riot in 3 days. And we were lucky because, one, we had leaders being both in the political end and within the police work that sent us to the field and says, take the city back. And that was the whole objective of the operation. There was an objective, and that was to take the city back. So for the first about 2 days, we were pretty much by ourselves. But then that's when the God unit started kicking in, and we were able to basically do what we would do even in a military operation working within a city, where you start taking block back by block back. It's a very methodical way of doing it, but you got to have the personnel to do it, and you got to have the will to do it via the political end. And remember, a lot of police chiefs in a lot of these cities, their hands are tied. They work for these mayors. They can get fired in 2 seconds. If they refuse an order from the political end, they're going to get looked at, and they're going to say, see you later. And they're going to appoint whoever they want to take their orders. And this is the reality of where we face here. So, when when we're dealing with these scenarios, my feeling is that those shelter in place, in particularly the suburb areas, are going to have probably a little bit better chance of defending themselves, because I can guarantee you, anybody I know that has their firearm system, these mobs aren't going to get in their houses. They're going to get stopped on their front lawn. And they will have in most places, a legal right to do that, because if you're not in fear for your life, when you have a mob that's looking to kick your front door down, I don't know when you're going to be in fear for your life. Now, we don't think it's a good idea to go outside of your house to try to confront these mobs, because you can get hit from all kinds of angles. And if you're out in the open, you're fair game. You can get hit in the head with a brick, and I don't care, you can have a sore weapon in your hand, or you can have your AR-15 in your hand. You get hit in the head with a brick and you're on the ground, that weapon means nothing to you. You're out of the fight. So going outside, probably not a good idea. But what you can do is, I apply a lot of the infantry stuff that I know to these type of scenarios. One, you need an early warning. You have to have a way of knowing that people are coming. There's a lot of ways of doing this without endangering yourself. I mean, if you got neighbors there, I mean, even if it's someone standing at the end of the corner or sitting in their car saying, hey, they're about a half a block away, and they haul ass back to their house and, shelter in place there. Now you know something's coming. Now you can have better situational awareness, as what Paul alluded to. But then again, what you can do is you can start to learn to harden your house, harden the entry points to your house. It kind of reminds me of when we're in a defensive position in the military environment. You're covering avenues of approach where people can come in towards you. You're hardening the position so that it can withstand more violence, if you will. And it's a continual process. So you start with the easy things first. How can someone get in my house? Well, I might need to secure my garage door so it's harder for them to open my garage and come in. I need to maybe harden my front door. Maybe the main entry points to my house, like a sliding glass door from my backyard into the house, which is probably one of the main entry points that you'll see people use even in regular criminal activity. How do I make it harder for them to come in? Because once I know they're there, if they're having a hard time coming in my case, what they're going to be facing is a SOCOM N1A with 125 grain hollow points in it, moving at 3,150 feet per second. And then if I know they're there and they can breach that point, at least now I got a way of defending myself at that breach point. So we would tell people, look at your house, look at how someone can get in here. And this might even help you with regular criminal activity. Why do we put an alarm system in our house? Okay, so when I'm sleeping and my door gets broken in, I got an early warning so I can get to my firearms so that I can start to defend my house. So, I'll kind of end it there in case Paul or you have something more you wanted to add into anything I said or add into it in general. But while you're sheltered in place, you want to have as hard in the place as you can. If there's other people in your house that are of age where you can say you would want them to have a firearm, make sure they're trained in that particular firearm, that it's something they can control, meaning that, there's, some weapon systems are easier for people to shoot than others. So make sure whatever they have in their hand, they can actually use. And I'll turn it back to any additional that wants to be added.
Lou, I think those are great points. So what we talked about so far is sheltering in place, setting a perimeter so you're not getting caught off guard. You have more time to respond. I always like to say the more time you have to respond, the more chance you have of an effective response. Being armed, which means having the weapons, the ammunition, the training, and the mindset so that you can effectively defend yourself. And then also, I'm going to throw in there, I think it's really important that people have first aid training and that they have first aid equipment so that if there's any medical emergencies, they have an effective way to respond to. I've been to countless scenes where folks lost their lives just because they didn't have something as simple as a tourniquet. In fact, I carry a tourniquet on both sides of my body because I've seen many times when people are shot and either this bone here was broken by the gunshot or their arm was incapacitated by the gunshot, usually because one of these bones were broken. And if the only way they can access that tourniquet is with that hand, well, then they don't have the tourniquet. But the bigger picture there is you want to have the first aid training and the equipment that you can do with medical emergencies too, because it doesn't do you any good to win the fight if you just end up dying afterwards from wounds that you couldn't effectively treat, whether they be your wounds or the wounds of someone else that you care about. And I definitely agree that everybody in that family unit, everybody under that roof who is capable of fighting should be equipped to fight back. This is not where one person is going to take the lead and everybody else is going to hide in the closet. If you've got a married couple or, partners, boyfriend, girlfriend, both people want to be prepared to respond. My son, he's 20. Any problems that we have in this house, he is a participant in solving. I think that's really important too. So I think we've addressed a lot of really important things about preparation. I'm sure there's a lot more that we can talk about, and I want to talk about it if you guys have anything to add. But I also want to go into responses. So once we're in this situation, and I want to look at this from 3 different areas. And again, this is all open to your input. What happens if you're in a car and you get caught in an angry group? If you're on foot walking somewhere, you get caught in an angry group, or if you're defending your business or you're defending your home, because I think those are all really probable scenarios. And then at the end of this show, Lou, what I would like you to talk about, if you don't mind, because you were there during the LA riots, if you could maybe share some examples of situations that you thought people did things that put them in harm's way that were mistakes that people can learn from so that they don't make the same mistakes. Or on the other end, things that you think people did really well that help protect them and their families so people can learn and be inspired by that also. But Paul, I think you're up this time. I don't know if I'm getting confused here. I apologize if I'm mixing up the order, but let's talk about any one of those scenarios you pick: car, home, business, or on foot. You get in a situation where you're attacked by a mob. In any one of those scenarios, pick one and tell us what you think is an important response.
All right. Well, a couple things. I do want to build off of one thing. This will apply to defending the business or home. Lou mentioned hardening, the home or hardening structures. And this is now getting into the actual tactical response or whatever. We've seen scenarios and people have this idea, okay, we got rioters in my neighborhood. I'm going to turn this into a Clint Eastwood movie and stand on my front lawn and wave around a weapon or whatever and yell at the crowd as a deterrent. I would consider that a bad idea or a bad choice. You don't know if that crowd has weapons too. Chances are they have weapons. There's going to be somebody in that crowd with a firearm. I'm all for defending your home with a firearm, of course, but to do so out in the open, to act as a deterrent, I would use just my voice as a deterrent and be behind something that's hardened. So that's just kind of an important point, because we talk about these tactics all the time, and then situations happen and people find themselves in the situation, and then they're not really well rehearsed, I guess is the best way to describe it, and what their response should be. And so here you could have a homeowner who's prepared. They have good locks on the doors, good windows, a good hardened structure. They've bought their weapons. They maybe went to the range once or twice, took a class. Next thing they know, they got a crowd of people breaching gates, breaking through, their secured neighborhood, walking through their neighborhood. And then their best laid plans are to stand on the front lawn and wave weapons around and yell at people, right? Things then, and so they end up putting themselves in danger when they had all of the tools available to them to do the right thing, but they weren't well rehearsed in the response. And so now we're getting into responses. That's what we want to talk about here, that people have, just like you want a rule of engagement, so you don't have to think these things through. We want to have have thought about your response prior to being in the situation, because people will oftentimes do a lot of the right things to prepare, but they're not rehearsing or actually training it, which is kind of understandable in some cases. It's kind of hard to train some of these scenarios or whatever, but they just don't think it all the way through. And then they find themselves doing things that maybe puts themselves in more danger or puts them at a disadvantage. So here's a great example, like on foot. And I'll use this example as happening in places like Chicago, places like Philadelphia, places like Portland all the time. You know, I'll paint the picture for you. You take your significant other, there's things going on in the area, but there's other areas where things aren't going on. You live in the city, you're going to go out to dinner or something, right? It's been quiet for a week, whatever. And you drive someplace, new, you're going to try a new restaurant out, you park somewhere, whatever. And then you're not always parking right in the same parking lot. I mean, it's a city, right? You might have to park in a lot, and then a couple blocks away, you hit a couple stores or you hit a couple things, and then you're on a nice date with your girl, right? And you end up at a nice dinner. Next thing you know, you hear some drum beats in the background, and you get word of a crowd, and now you have a crowd of Antifa types and people who are rioting that separate you between you and your car. This is like a scenario that happens to people now all the time. And so one thing I want to mention about this is you need to be in good physical condition. You don't necessarily need to be an Olympic athlete or a professional fighter, but I don't know about you guys, but I take for granted sometimes because I'm in decent shape. And you guys, both of you, Ian and Lou, do things to keep yourself in good physical condition every single day. But a lot of people out there don't. A lot of people's significant others out there don't. And so they can't even walk. I mean, walking a few city blocks for some people is a struggle. That's going to be a real problem in these types of scenarios. You may find yourself with that separation, and now you have to sit here in a place, or you have to actually leave because the crowd is expanding. You may have to walk quite a few miles, and you may be separated from your vehicle before you can find an Uber or a taxi or a Lyft to get you out of there. You know what I mean? And so that's something to consider, just having the physical conditioning to get through this stuff. But on foot, I mean, we've talked about prevention. So now what happens? And that's kind of what can happen all the time, is that you do your intel, you think you know what's going on, and then next thing you know, riots are breaking out. Things are breaking out right in front of you. Or you're at that restaurant sitting on a patio, and all of a sudden people are yelling at the people in the restaurant, and you see crowds building, you hear stuff breaking, or you see a crowd wing around the corner. These are things that happen. So the first thing is, as quickly as you can, you just want to leave the area. You're not there to get in a fight or to rescue anybody, or to participate in civil unrest, or to yell your political opinions at somebody. I mean, these are things that are not going to help you out or serve you. You need to get out of that area as quickly as possible. And you do that by getting out in at the outskirts of it, so you don't want to try to go against the crowd. You want to go flow with it. Picture it like a river. You're not trying to swim upstream. You're trying to go with it, and you want to get with it and then away from it. So the crowds will travel like through pathways of streets, for example, and then you'll have a side street where there really isn't anybody. That's kind of where you want to, I don't want to say anybody, there's people, it's a public place, but that's not where the rioting's happening. You want to go there. This is why having knowledge of your area, having a map, having a street map, even one that's just saved on your phone, that's not requiring a signal, that you can look at, identify where you're at, and escape. Those things are important, and so you want to just take yourself out of the situation. If there are police that are coming down, let's say you have rioters colliding with police, you actually want to avoid the police. I'd like to hear Lou's opinion on this one, but the police are there to, break up rioters. So to move towards the police, they don't know the difference between you and somebody who's a physical threat to them. So you don't want to move towards these guys who are trying to do their job. You're going to find yourself eating pavement, possibly by a guy with a shield or a guy dressed up in riot gear who doesn't know the difference between you and someone who's trying to punch him or beat him up. You don't want to be in that circumstance. I mean, and so you want to move away from where the violence is happening. And that's pretty much a basic thing. And get away from these areas, take yourself out of it. Obviously, if you have to fight, you're going to have to fight, but then you're fighting to get out of the situation. You're not fighting to have a sparring match or to square off with a bunch of people that you politically disagree with. What you're trying to do is get yourself to safety. And that's got to be the first and most prominent thing that you have in your mind. Most people that find themselves in a real problem where, I mean, I say most people, I mean, obviously there's situations we've seen the LA riots, the videotapes of guys getting pulled out of a truck and beaten into the ground. So, I mean, there's those situations certainly, but most of the time guys who find themselves in these fights or find themselves getting hurt, injured, because they're not taking themselves out of the core of where the violence is happening. They're putting themselves into it more, or they're just not aware or whatever. And so that's my basic advice on foot from what we could cover in a format like this without imparting physical skills, is to have the preparation and the mindset of getting yourself out of that situation where the violence is happening and taking yourself out of it. These people that are creating civil unrest, there's enough people that are around there that are going to want to fight them. There's enough property for them to trash. There's enough stuff, they're not necessarily making you their personal target. And so if you're moving and escaping from that, then you're going to be a lot better off. And so having the ability to do that, that's the thing. And again, staying away from the center of the crowd, staying away from the centers where the violence are happening, move towards the outside, move towards the outskirts, and then get yourself out of the flow of that traffic. You got to picture it again like a flow of people, and it's all very chaotic. There's mob mentality, does not have logic to it. It's almost it's like a virus that just spreads. And so it's spreading down one road or a couple of streets, you take yourself out of that. Even if you're separated from your car, all right, so maybe you go a couple miles away, hold up in a coffee shop or McDonald's, and you just wait it out for the next 6 hours till cops get it under control before you can maybe go to where your car's at. That could be a thing, or maybe you're just calling a friend for a ride after you get to safety miles away, or you're calling that Uber. So I'll stop there because there's a lot of directions we could go, and I don't know what we can cover in a podcast like this or in a format like this. So turn it over to Lou to expand here.
Yeah, and let me just add one thing too, that for, you bring up the point about being physically able to, let's say, walk for miles as an example. For those folks who aren't able to do that because they have a medical condition or they're handicapped, that just really emphasizes the need for you to stay out of those situations, really where prevention becomes even more urgent. Because if you do end up in a bad situation and you don't have the ability to get yourself out of it, then you're stuck with it. So that makes prevention even more urgent. And then the other thing I'll mention real quick, right before I turn it over to Lou, and I had a student ask me one time, and I'm not being critical of the question. I love all questions, and I'm grateful for all questions, but it makes a really good point. She says, what do you do if your hands are duct taped to a chair and your feet are duct taped to the chair? What are your best options then? And again, I'm not making fun of the question. I was glad that she felt comfortable in asking it. But of course, the obvious answer is you don't have any options then. And the point is that you want to act when you have the most options available. And that's before the situation or at the beginning of the situation, because at some point you can get deep enough into a situation where you simply start to lose more and more options to the point where you may not have any more options left. So the sooner you act, the more options you're going to have, the better chance you have of an effective option. Lou, what are your thoughts about either building on what Paul said or taking any one of those scenarios on foot, home, business, or vehicle where you end up in an angry mob? What are some of your options?
Okay, one quick thing, Paul alluded to that I'll tackle right off the bat. He mentioned about, sometimes if you see the police, people are sometimes trained to go to them to seek safety. Well, in these things, that's probably the last place you want to be, because all you got to do is look at some of these incidents and where's the violence being put against? Well, it's the police there. They're having a hard enough time holding their own. and not their fault. I will restate again. They're being controlled as to how they can respond. I can guarantee you this. There's nobody I know and have ever met professionally in law enforcement that would stand there and allow a crowd to put lasers in their eyes without doing something very proactive about stopping it. There's no one I know that would stand there and see people winding up with Molotov cocktails ready to throw it into their midst. That's a lethal force encounter right there. That stuff can get you killed. It can put serious bodily harm on you. I can guarantee you this, that nonsense would stop in 2 seconds if the quote rules of engagement were adjusted properly. This stuff would end really quick because it would not behoove these people doing it to stand in front of a bunch of police pulling that stuff. So that said, probably the worst place to be is around them because that's where all of this violence is ultimately going to be projected. So, you know, what Paul says is the absolute truth. You need to break contact and get out of there. I mean, every you know, whether it's a special operations unit, any unit that's out there doing patrolling operations, always in the plan is a plan to break contact. Because if you don't break contact at the right time, you can be overwhelmed really quick. So we have to have that same type of thought process about when you start to see things building, you need to find a way out. You're in a restaurant and you see a crowd building out in front of it. I'd be looking for the rear exit and I'd be hauling over to that rear exit. I'd grab whoever's with me and it's time to leave. Throw the money on the table so you don't get accused of, you know, skipping out on your bill or something, but I'd be leaving real quick because the probability is there's going to be nothing when you go out that back door as opposed to what's out in the front door. So you plan your options and you should be looking for this stuff every time you go anywhere. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Where are the exits? Am I at least facing an area where I can look and see if there's something there? Or is my back to it where by the time I detect something is going wrong, it might be too late. So, you know, just to build upon that, I think where I might interject something here that would be of value is the defense within your home itself. Because I think probably in most places, and again, we would say go to your local DA's office, whoever you can to get legal advice on this. But, you know, when you got a mob kicking in the front door, having a lethal response to that is probably going to be, you know, above board anywhere that you go. So what we talk about, and I know Ian and I, we've he's hosted me in doing a home defense workshop about what do we do in our home to be able to defend it. And I always profess this concept of a strong point defense, meaning that wandering around our house hunting for people is probably a bad idea for most people because most people don't know how to really search properly. You don't have 360-degree awareness around you. So you got two eyes and the only thing you see in your environment is what's directly in front of you. And it's usually the things you don't see are the things that are hurt or kill you. And it's very difficult for people to get practice at doing this because where do you get practice doing it? I mean, when I was working it, you know, we searched all the time. Every time someone bails on you and they take off when you're in pursuits, you're searching. When you get home invasion calls, you're going in a house and you're hunting people that's supposed to be in there that have invaded someone's house. So you get a lot of practice at doing these things. You get practice at, you know, how do I corner? How do I use my weapon in these positions? You know, all of these things that are training related, you have to go out and apply, and you're doing it frequently. So you get pretty good at doing it when you're applying it. So in your house, when you apply this strong point defense, well, once you've identified a danger point where you got people that are trying to get through it, well, that is a point at which you're going to have to make your fight. You're not going to be able to go hide in a closet. They're going to find you. You're not going to be able to just go hide in the bathroom and shut the door and think they're going to go away. This is wishful thinking. So if you're going to engage someone, you want to engage them from a point at which you have got good either concealment or cover and concealment, meaning if you plan this out, you could probably put yourself in a place where you'd have the best defensible position. And that's where you're going to defend your life and the life of your family. So it's not a real hard concept to understand, but if there's a place for long guns in this scenario, that's a place for a long gun as opposed to a handgun. And you alluded to it some, and Paul also, these people that you're going to fight, they're not fighters. They're not looking to be on the other end of anybody's muzzle. Believe me, I've been there with this. They don't want to be there. And I guarantee you, once the shooting starts, there's few people going to be standing there wanting to get shot, because that's not who they are. These people are cowards. They're lowlifes. And I'm sorry to be so strong about it, but who the hell kicks someone's door in that's occupied by a decent family and wants to try to do whatever they want to do to them? If there's women in there, what do you think is going to be the biggest potential of happening? If you got kids in there, what's the potential that can happen to them? You know, who does that kind of thing? Your enemy, if you will, is someone that is about as low as a snake's belly button, because normal, decent people don't do that. And if they do it and they pay a price for it, so long as it's within your jurisdiction, it's a legal thing, don't allow them to breach into your house. Because once they're in there, if you haven't confronted them, you're at their mercy. You bring up this thing about being duct taped to a chair and that helplessness. So what do you do once that happens? Well, what do you do if someone, you know, you got a group of 5, 6, 10 people that breach your door, they're in your house, and you don't have a way of repelling them? What do you think is going to happen? You're at their mercy, period. I've had to respond to home invasions where people are hiding in their closet. And what ended it was pointing a rifle at the person's head that was pulling this off, giving them an option of living or dying. And because they're cowards, they don't want to fight you at that point. So what do? They prone themselves out, and they want nothing to do with having to pay the price for what they've just done. Okay, so that's reality. You know, these people aren't superhuman beings. They're not trained fighters. They're not a military unit. They're not fighting, you know, like we trained in the military and what we do in police work, where you're doing operations together, where people know how to cover each other. These are just bad people. So when we talk about hard point defense, you pick that point where you want to make your stand in your house. And that's where you fight from. And when you begin the fight, there's only one end of it, and that's you win. Whatever has to be done there, you win. They lose. I'll guarantee you, you're going to probably see their rear ends and elbows as opposed to the front of their body if shooting starts. They're not going to want to be there. They're not expecting that. What they're used to dealing with is what every criminal in this damn country thinks that they're dealing with, and that's a victim. And once you're no longer a victim, that's where the rubber meets the road. So it's, you know, and you alluded to it, Ian, in one of your statements about, you know, once people know that there's someone there that they want, that is willing to fight them, there's not that many people that really want to stand there and fight to that degree. You know, who wants to, how many of them want to say that they die doing what they do? So, you know, from the topic of home defense, we could put a lot more detail in this, but I think that's more for like a course. But the bottom line is that you need to pick those places so that when they're getting breached, you have a way to effectively fight. Last point, and I'll be brief on this, is if you're in a vehicle, don't stop. Don't stop. Now, that doesn't say you're going to, you know, put it to the floorboard and bring it up to 8,000 RPM and, you know, roll people over like bowling balls. But what you can do is still continue moving. And if there's any sane people in front of you, which there may or may not be, they're going to get out of your way eventually. You see this in videos of some of these incidents where this happens. The person isn't moving at any rapid rate, but what they're just doing is continually moving. And if they continually move, eventually they're building a wedge in whoever's in front of them, and that's your escape. And once you see that opening, then that's where you go for it. And then you're out of the scenario. But don't stop, because once you stop, if there's a mob there, your windows on the side of you, they break pretty easily. You know, I've had, be honest with you, at work, I've had to break them to extract people out of cars because they don't want to get out. Not that hard to do, you know? So if you are stopped, then you're at their mercy. And if you get drugged out of your car, what do you think is going to happen? Just go look at any, you could go to YouTube or any other place you want to go to, Facebook. You see this in video all the time. What happens to people once the mob gets their hands on them? So keep moving. It's a very simple concept, and there's some states like, Florida, for example, they're starting to put laws in place that are basically exonerating people before it even happens, and basically saying it's legal for you to do these things. Florida is in the process of passing a law to basically make it without question legal for these store owners to engage people to protect their property. And this, I think, is going to become a trend. If this stuff keeps on going, you're going to see more and more of this happening within the legislators in some of these places, so that people, again, getting back to knowing what you can do. You asked me to make a statement about the riot. Well, I had to at some point during the operations there go into the Korean community there, and what we're doing is waving to people up on the top of their buildings with their rifles in their hands, and there's not one window broken, there's not one thing broken, there's not one thing stolen, and they got smiles on their faces. Because a lot of them that have come here from Korea, as we know, because I'm in Korean martial arts, so I've been around Koreans my entire life. They do military service there mandatorily, so they all know how to shoot, and they're not afraid to shoot. I've done operations up on the DMZ up there. They're locked on. They know what they're doing. So they come back in the civilian world. They don't leave that knowledge behind. So all they did is they applied simple principles of defensive positions to their businesses. So, these are things that hopefully nationwide, it should be it should be absolutely no issue involved with people defending their businesses, just like it should be no issue defending your home. So I'll turn it back in case there's anything you want to add.
I'll just add a couple quick things. From a tactical point of view, one of the best positions somebody can be in is what's called a prepared defender, where excuse me, it's not COVID, by the way, that's allergies, where the only thing that you have to own is a door, especially if when they breach that door, you can see them before they can see you, so that you have time to break your shots before they can get eyes on you and break shots on you. So the worst position that somebody could be in from a tactical point of view, one of the worst positions, is to have to enter through that door and deal with an unknown threat inside of that room. So if the people can set themselves up so that all they have to do is own that door, especially from a position of concealment where the people coming through that door can't see them before the person who's defending themselves has time to engage them, they're really increasing their chance of success. And while nothing is a guarantee, once those first shots get launched, very oftentimes what you see is people start to disperse. And that's something that we've all said here. It's not a guarantee, but it's very common. And I've been to countless scenes where I've seen these very things happen. People defend themselves. One particular scene, somebody was kicking in the front door, person heard the noise, grabbed their gun, locked it on the front door, waited for them to come through. And then that individual, that criminal that broke into the house became our client at the medical examiner, and we were there to pick him up. But I've also been to scenes where people didn't have the ability to defend themselves, and we were there to pick them up, including one particular person who was trying to hide in the closet, and that clearly didn't save their life. So we need to have the ability to fight back. And if you can put yourself on that side of the equation where you're guarding a door, so they have to come through the door to get you, you're really stacking the odds in your favor. The other thing I'll mention, and you guys can comment on this, is that if you are in a vehicle where you're trapped in the crowd and you don't have the ability to simply hit the gas because you're simply surrounded, and we've been to scenes where we were actually surrounded by crowds, and it was hard to get through the crowd to get to the scene, even when they're banging on our vehicle and stuff like that. If you start to put yourself in a position where you're going back, forward, back, forward, you will open up that space so that you can hit the gas and get out of there. So if you're ever in that situation, don't get out of your vehicle. Don't stop moving, because once you stop moving, everybody's just going to converge on you. If you can't just go forward, then you start to go back and forward, back and forward, back and forward until you do have that space that you can get forward, and then get out of there as quick as you can. And I'm going to ask one last question. I want your opinion on this. I feel that pepper spray can have a role when you're dealing with crowds, and whether it's in your vehicle or when you're walking, I think pepper spray can play a role. Now, with anything that we do, there's always considerations. You don't want to be in a situation where you envelop yourself in the spray and then you make your situation worse. But I do think that pepper spray can be advantageous in some situations when you're dealing with crowds. What are your thoughts on that? Whoever wants to jump in.
Well, I'll jump in real quick on a couple things. First of all, and this is related to pepper too, even. I just want to mention in general, just like I kind of wanted to mention before in general about the physical fitness aspect of it, but also mental resiliency is really important here too. And it's not to get off topic, but people are not used to being uncomfortable in our society. Now, we sitting here on this panel in this discussion, we're all used to discomfort. We've all put ourselves through discomfort and training. We've done things that are uncomfortable. You know, a big part of military training, particularly for elite units, is to just make you really, really, really uncomfortable. You know, and then have to mentally and physically overcome that. And it's not even a physical barrier as much as it is a mental one. But people today are not mentally resilient, and then that ends up becoming a problem in these scenarios. Quick example. This was a few days ago. I was at a cafe. A guy started choking. There goes my camera. I don't know why I just did that. There we go. All right, fix that. I don't know. So anyway, but a guy was choking. He needed a Heimlich maneuver, right? And so people were like, "Host, what's going on?" I walk over there. His friend had started to do it. I positioned his hand, stood him up, and his friend was actually doing the Heimlich. I put his hands where they need to go. It worked. The guy started breathing again. He just put some food down the wrong tube, right? Not a big deal. Guy was like, "Oh wow, I just breathe in food or something. What happened to me?" Yeah, okay, happens, right? I go to sit back down. There's like maybe a 21, 22-year-old, I'd call him a kid, who's working. He's clutching his chest and he's breathing heavy. I look at this guy. I'm like, are you okay, man? Like, are you gonna be all right? He's like, "Oh, well, it was really scary." I'm like, oh my God, he can't even watch someone need the Heimlich maneuver. He needs, a counseling session now and a hug. I just couldn't, I don't even know what planet we're on half the time. But my point is it's a sad but funny story, but that a lot of people are not used to mental resiliency. Look, you're going to be uncomfortable in that little scenario where you're on a great date with your girl and all of a sudden you got a crowd separating from you and your car and you got to walk a couple miles and change your plans for the evening. Yeah, that's going to suck. It's going to be uncomfortable. If you're held up in your house for longer than what you would like, might be uncomfortable. If you're in a fight, that's very uncomfortable. And so you got to get used to discomfort. And some of the people watching this, and your average person today, they're just not, they mentally break down when things get uncomfortable, and that's going to cause them to fail. That leads us into pepper spray too. I think pepper spray, and I'm not a law enforcement professional, but it stands to reason that pepper spray is a great tool to kind of clear out a crowd and some space so you can get away from something. And it's less lethal. And so you're not going to, it's not the same as shooting into a crowd. It's not going to cause you that kind of trouble, right? And so I think that pepper spray is definitely a good tool that people need to consider. Because people, particularly rioters and stuff like that, they don't want to be uncomfortable either, as we've already sort of stated here. They're not here to fight, right? They're not an insurgency. They're not trying to go see Allah, and willing to fight you to the death. They want to just cause, they have their agenda. They want to cause problems. And when some discomfort is presented, like you fighting back, for example, they're not necessarily, a lot of them are not going to want to stick around for that, especially if they think they're not going to win. So spraying pepper spray at a group of people that are causing you, that are potentially causing you like a threat to you, right? To get out of that situation is probably pretty valuable. And they're not just going to want to they're not necessarily the determined attacker or criminal that's going to want to fight through it. And so I think pepper spray is a very valuable tool for that. You got to make sure you have training with it though. Take a course, okay? Know what kind to get, not just for the legal stuff in your area, but also what's going to be effective. Some little keychain things is just not going to be enough, not going to be effective. Know what kind of spray you need to carry, where you need to carry it so you can access it in an emergency, and then how it's going to happen. And then back to discomfort, you should probably know what it's like to get sprayed with pepper spray or feel what that's like. Okay. Because if you do spray it and some blows back in your face or whatever, it's going to be a little bit discomforting, so some of these courses, they, can put you through that where you get sprayed. I mean, whenever we learn how to deal with OC spray or pepper spray or, even tasers and stuff, generally you're getting a taste of it, so you know what that's like. And I think that's a valuable thing for people to train, just so you, again, especially with pepper spray, because there's that blowback effect, depending on what kind you're using. If you get a little bit in your face, a little bit in your lungs, you're not going to die. It's just a discomfort. Other people are unfamiliar with that discomfort, and they're going to be more afraid of what is, going on than you, if you've taken it before. And you take a little bit in your lungs while you're trying to get away, you'll be fine, but just putting yourself through that training, that's part of that preparation. So I'll leave it, the rest up to Lou here and you, Ian.
Just one comment before we head over to Lou and, Paul, you mentioned the issue about knowing the right pepper spray product. We do have a free video on our YouTube channel, and it is called Pepper Spray, Which Product is Best for You? It's completely free. There's no strings attached. There are links in the show notes of that video for which I get no commission for. They're just put there as a public service. If anybody has an interest in, you're more than welcome to look up that video or contact us and we'll send it to you. I do want to mention one thing about mindset, and then we'll kick it back to Lou, and I think to kind of wrap things up here. But I know being at scenes where we had to deal with angry mobs, you can very quickly see the people who are resilient and experienced, and those who are completely out of their element. Some people are walking around with deer in the headlights and you can tell they're panicking, where other people, they're literally joking around and having a good time because they understand what's going on in the situation. We were in one group where we had a really big crowd. This is one of these scenes where I could barely get my vehicle through because the crowd was so large and so angry. And also where we were, the streets were really congested. And I just went over by a large tree where I knew I had cover. They were radioing for more officers to send on the perimeter. And I knew if they broke the perimeter, we could deal with it. I had my point of cover. And until that happened, everything was fine. And we didn't have anything to worry about. We've been in scenes where we're literally trapped inside of houses with groups of police officers and could not go outside because of the group outside. And we're waiting for backup to arrive so that we could leave. But again, as long as we're in the house, if they come through the door, we know how to deal with that. And if they don't come through the door, well, fine. Help is coming. And when it does, we can all leave then and everything's fine. And we were in one particular scene where we were in an angry group and things were starting to escalate out of control. We actually had to hightail it to the vehicle as quick as we could to get out of there. But right before that happened, I had a partner with me who was a little bit less experienced and was getting really scared. And I looked at him, I said, look, when you look at these people, you have to see one of two things. You have to see fear or you have to see respect. Because if you don't see one of those two things, you're in trouble and this thing is going to escalate really quick. So you're going to have to stand your ground. You're going to have to keep it together and you're going to have to show that you're comfortable and strong in this environment or things are going to escalate. Now that doesn't apply 100% to what we're talking about here, because obviously if you're dealing with an angry mob, that isn't actually a riot. That's different than just dealing with an angry mob at a scene. But the point is, I think that mental resiliency really is the X factor, because if you can't hold it together from a mental point of view, it really doesn't matter what tactics you plan for or what equipment you have. If you can't keep it together on that emotional level, you're really just going to be in a situation where things are going to get worse. And I will mention one last thing too. One of the things that I talk about is you never want to wait until you're in the problem to solve the problem. You always want to use your imagination to think of realistic responses, the probable scenarios, so that if you're in the situation, you already have a game plan. Because under stress, that intellectual brain gets suppressed and it's harder to solve problems. So you want to solve your problems when you're not under stress. So when you're in that situation, you already have a plan to react with, rather than having to come up with a plan. And I'm going to mention one last thing here. If you ever are in a difficult situation, you want to, as quickly as possible, shift your focus from the problem to a simple solution. A lot of times when people freeze, they freeze because they're caught off guard and they don't know what to do. If you have a plan in place before you need it, and you know how to shift your focus from the problem to a simple solution, that can help prevent you from feeling overwhelmed, getting caught off guard, and then freezing under the circumstances. Let me give you a brief example. If you see somebody with a knife and they're threatening to kill you, you go, man, that's a big knife and I don't want to get stabbed over and over again and I don't want to die today. That's going to be what causes a lot of people to freeze. But if you shift your focus from the problem to a simple solution like door out, object throw, gun shoot, or even just move, that can get you into the action phase and help protect you from freezing under those circumstances. And that's like what Paul talked about earlier. When you see the crowd coming, keep it together emotionally. Understand that there is a game plan. There is a plan forward. That plan forward is to move away from the crowd. That's the direction of safety. So you're shifting your focus from the problem, oh my God, this crowd's coming, what do I do? To that simple solution, move away from the crowd, get to a point of safety, then worry about everything else afterwards, like getting back to my vehicle and getting back home. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that emotional factor really is an X factor. And having seen that myself many times in dangerous situations, some people just completely fall apart. You need to get a handle on that before you're in the situation, because everything else is just academic if you can't hold it together from an emotional point of view. And Lou, I think this podcast, like always, because there's so much to talk about, can really go on for a long time. So it's probably a good time to wrap it up. And I'd like to wrap it up with your closing thoughts. And of course, Paul, if you have anything to add, I would love to add that too. And then I will wrap things up with just a very quick conclusion once you guys are done. So Lou, the ball's in your court, sir.
Sure. Well, if I had to wrap this, what I think is a very beneficial conversation we've been having, it shows the importance of prior planning. And prior planning is what usually can get us through most of what happens. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that's lacking in most people's day-to-day dealing with issues and problems and things of that nature is they're not planning for what the potential event can be. So you can take a lot of the individual things that we're talking about and start developing planning about it. Real simple. Paul brings up the point about, hey, you might have to stay in your house for a few days. So you know what? This might be a day that you take a trip to the grocery store. Buy some things that don't even require to be heated up or anything in case the power goes off. We lived off of cold sea rations for weeks on end during my time in the Marine Corps. We can open a can of tuna fish and eat. You can open a can of vegetables and eat. You can create your own, quote, sea rations. I don't want to get bad flashbacks eating those things. But the point is that you can go to the store today and eliminate that problem for you having a shelter in place in your house by a simple trip to the grocery store. Okay. If you have some aversion to owning a firearm and defending yourself, well, you might want to take some courses and things that would maybe cause you to change your opinion on that. Go take a self-defense course and find out how easy it is for people to hurt you. Then that might motivate you to learn how to not allow them to hurt you, And when you talk about defending yourself with those firearms, I remember vividly having to go into a home invasion scenario where five guys were trying to invade this one home, lady's home with her 3 kids, husband's away. She's got the kids and her in a closet in the master bedroom. We show up on scene. We had a K9 unit with us. There's me, my partner, 1 deputy in the K9 unit, and 2 of them were lookouts outside. One of them gave up because he didn't want to get hurt. One of them ran. And one thing you don't want to do is run from a hungry 95-pound German Shepherd and try to jump a fence and not make it over before the dog actually gets you right by your rear end. It goes downhill from there. But then we had to make entry in the house. We confronted 2 of them in the bottom floor, took them in custody. But the lady's on the phone and she's saying, I hear him in the bedroom next door to me. Now she's got 3 kids with her. She's by herself, no firearm, no means of defense other than hiding in a closet. So I was armed with my patrol rifle. I very stealthily went down the passageway leading to it. And when I worked the corner on him and I put the light in his face, the term deer in a headlight had absolutely, minimum value here. His eyeballs almost came out of their sockets because now he's confronted with someone that just saying for me, I would have dropped him in 2 seconds had he given him a reason to do it. But he's completely dumbfounded at that point. The only thing he could think of doing is jumping on the floor, putting his hands out because he knew he was about to get his life ended. But the point I'm trying to make is that, and then, I had to slip my ID card underneath the door because the lady didn't want to even believe that it was us at the door. So the bottom line to it is I'm looking at this lady terrified with her 3 kids and no means of defending herself. And believe me, for anybody that would have had a gun with this yo-yo that I confronted, he would have been a pretty simple shot because he had in no way, shape, or form walked in there thinking he was going to get in a confrontation with anybody. He thought he was going to take over that house and anybody and anything in it. So all she had to have done, she would have probably had no more than about maybe a 10, 12-foot shot, which would have required, we all train people. Not that difficult to train people to hit a human body at, 10, 12 feet away. And it could have ended not only her being in jeopardy, she's got 3 kids with her. If nothing else, think of the fact of what's going to happen to them. And get out there and get some training, have the means to defend yourself. That's 95% of the problem solved right there. Because you're going to be thinking, you're going to have a solution to a problem that's started, and you're going to have the will to use it because the training brings you to that point. People don't naturally want to kill or be violent, but we can get trained really good to be able to do that. And all 3 of us understand that because we've been in those scenarios. So I'll end it with that, get out there and we've told you what the problem is. Now find your solutions for it.
Lou, Does this count as an
Hey,
attack
there you go.
dog?
My chihuahua's sleeping, so I won't bring her in the picture. I love it.
Paul, do you have any thoughts and those are all great points, of course. Paul, do you have any thoughts that you want to kind of wrap things up with?
Yeah, just one thought, which is kind of, well, they kind of combine together, is take action. All right, not just in the situation, but right now, as you're already taking action by watching this, to the audience, but take action too in your preparation. Take action in some of these things. It's interesting to talk about, but take action, actually do something. And I want to add that something is always infinitely better than nothing. So what a lot of times people do when they approach these problems, they go, well, they get big plans. Well, I'm going to go and take this weekend tactical shooting course, and I'm going to do all of this stuff, and that's what I'm going to do. And of course, then that requires, a bunch of money, a bunch of time, and a bunch of investment. And then they just don't get around to it. And then, well, next month happens. Well, I got busy at work. And next thing you know, it's 6 months later, and they haven't even put a first aid kit together to keep in their house, And so this is the thing that often happens to people, is that they get big ideas and great ideas, and then they don't execute anything. So just a little bit of execution goes a long way. I get really busy, and just like we all do, but I'll do a little bit of physical training every day, even if I'm really busy. Even if I'm only doing 10 or 15 minutes of working some physical skills for self-defense, that's infinitely better than doing nothing. Is it as good as taking, doing a couple hours of training several times a week in a class? Well, of course it's not as good as that, but is it infinitely better than zero? 100%. Ian, you have some online courses that we're going to promote, especially with, the current climate with COVID and different things. There's a ton of benefits to taking an online course, especially with distance being a factor from certain instructors, especially with restrictions and constraints in certain areas. Is an online course for a few hours, maybe a few consecutive hours, is it better than a week-long shooting clinic or something? Well, no, of course not. But is it infinitely better than zero? Oh, infinitely better. You know what I mean? And so that's what my advice is to people listening, is to take action, and don't get so caught up into, your big plans. That's fine. Have big plans of training. Have ideas of what you want to do. But the point is, you got to take action, even if it's only this much, even if it's only just a little bit of action that you're taking on a regular basis. Consistent, even when it comes to training, especially consistent training a little bit at a time is usually always better than some bulk, a couple day training and then not doing anything for a year or so. Right. And so I think that's about the only thing that I would, I think this is about the only thing I'd add to what's been said.
Well, Paul, to build on your point, if somebody did one palm strike a day at the end of the year, that's 365 palm strikes. How many people that have done 365 palm strikes, right? So, I mean, that's huge, right? But it's so small and so simple. With the online courses, guys, we're going to be having courses that feature both of you. Lou, we just taught our first virtual class, or I featured you in a virtual class that you taught on combat shooting methods. I've been teaching a lot of these virtual classes, unarmed self-defense for men, women, and teens, for children. We have a crime prevention class that's online. And then we also have for teens, how to become a certified babysitter or a certified pet sitter. And those are classes that you can participate from anywhere in the world, from the comfort and convenience of your own home. Paul, we've got classes that are coming up with you. I've got classes coming up with one of the other female that I call teacher, Little Joe Ferreira. And what's nice about these classes is, unlike just, let's say, a YouTube video where people are learning passively, they get to interact with the instructor. They can ask you questions, just like they would if we were all in the same room together. For the classes that involve physical skills, they're going through guided practice from the instructor who's watching them and guiding them through the learning process as they learn how to draw their gun, as they learn how to do strikes. It's really like being there in the same room with somebody but from the comfort and convenience of your own home. And you can do it from anywhere in the world. We've had students now from New York, from Texas, from California, from Ohio. We're located in Michigan. We had our first international student a few months ago, and this is just going to continue to build. So we would love to have people participate in our virtual classes. We do them because we believe they really help people. If I didn't believe they really help people, I wouldn't do them. I mean, it really doesn't get any more simple than that. But gentlemen, I kind of want to wrap things up here by thanking you both for being a part of this show. I want to thank you both for your service, both to your country and to your community. And I say that not only Lou as being a trooper, but for both of you, Paul and Lou, being instructors that are out there teaching people and helping people not only keep themselves more safe, but to keep other people safe too. I really appreciate that. As a trainer, this is my calling in life, and I know what a difference that it makes. I'm so grateful to you guys that we can all work together and help people that way. If you like this show, you can help us help you and help other people too. It's simple. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share this video with other people. Subscribe to our podcast. Share this show with other people. Go to livesafeacademy.com/connect, where you have access to our podcast, our videos, our articles, our in-person classes in the Detroit, Michigan area, and again, our live virtual classes, including classes that feature Lou and feature Paul, where you can learn from anywhere in the world and participate with these folks just like you were there in person. It's a phenomenal opportunity. Also, I know this show is going to be on Paul's show, Apex Mindset. So if you guys are watching from Paul's show, I would love for you guys to come over and subscribe to our YouTube channel, see what other videos we have. And if you're listening to this on my show or on my podcast, I would love for you guys to go over to Paul's show and subscribe to him, look at his videos, and see what he has to offer. So guys, thank you very much for everything that you did today. Thank you for everything that you've done for people in the past. Thank you for those of you watching and listening to the show. I hope everybody has a great day and stay safe.